Hello and welcome to episode 132 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg and it's just me. The intro is going to be very short this episode. We still have nothing much to talk about from Forge World. We're getting there. Hopefully, in a few weeks we'll have them open, but there is the process for making resin is a little bit more involved than it is for plastic, and Games Workshop are the money makers of, the prime, should we say. So it's understandable that Forge World is going to be behind them, but fingers crossed we'll start to see something in a few weeks. We can hope, we can dream. Until then, we have got tiny planes, more tiny planes coming from Games Workshop, which I've ordered a few of for Aeronautica, but I know that people want to use them for Titans and for various other things like that. So you can go and get them from Element Games. They GW are putting out a lot of stuff at the moment, trying to catch up that little bit. And if you go through the link in the show notes or go via the advert on the website, if you click that and then log in and then select your basket, then you help support the show, which is wonderful, and we thank you for it. And Element are, they're struggling like others are struggling at the moment because orders are not coming in necessarily as quick as they would like, and the postal services are they're not quite working as well as they would do in normal circumstances. So it is what it is at the end of the day, and we're living in this time, and we go for that. But I know that I need to resupply on the paints that I've used, the minimal paints that I've used through lockdown and things like that as well. But Games Workshop will also be pummeling out a lot of stuff. Of course, we've got 9th edition coming out for those who play multiple games, and that looks exciting as well. We've also got Geek Shield, which should have an advert coming up in this episode somewhere if Pete gets it to me in time. I'm recording this over the weekend and I'm just waiting for it to turn up. So I'll leave that one for Pete to talk about. But I will say that if you go to Geek Shield on Facebook, then you can find out all information there about how Pete is helping people sort out some insurance and do it in the right way. As I say, I'm going to keep this intro section very short. I have been painting some Demons of the Runestorm. I've actually been painting, which is amazing. Managed to sit down, just get a little bit of that hobby juice flowing, but it's been slow. But fingers crossed it starts to pick up a little bit, because I'm going to be buying new toys soon enough. So we need to start working through some of that backlog. One piece of important news is, though, that Blood and Glory this year won't be happening. We'll be coming back in 2021. So any of you who are looking to come and play Heresy or Titanicus, or indeed any of the other games there, these things take a lot of organising, involving a lot of people, from sponsors through to organisers through to the event itself, and with up to 600 people in one area. There are certain facilities like toilets and food where everyone will have to funnel through limited spaces by October. The chances are that size of event is probably not going to be allowed to occur in the UK. So it makes sense now to call it off before money gets paid out and before all those other things that can complicate issues occurs. So I think it's the right decision. Had a brief chat with Ben on that one. What hopefully smaller events will be going by then, who knows, but it's a very different beast if you can have 20 people in a largish hall compared to trying to fit 600 people into one area and everything that goes with that. So, it's sad, but we can put that energy now into next year's Blood and Glory and see what we can do. And hopefully I might even be able to get stuff done on time, given an extra year. But you know what they say about deadlines. It's they're there to be pushed, aren't they, really? So beyond that, I don't have much more to talk about. We are joined by Steve Foote. The idea of this was to talk about cosplay specifically, and kind of how to get into that and everything else. As is usual with these things, I ramble a lot, and I know Steve, and we haven't chatted for a while, and a fair part of the conversation is not necessarily about that, but it's about gaming and the broad scopes of cross genre gaming, and things like that as well. Hopefully you'll find it really interesting. Steve's a great guy. I really like Steve. And then we get Dan Palfrey on to expand a little bit on what Miles talked about when he was on with the return to Isstvan, and I've seen the hashtag popping up, more people getting involved around and about, and some really cool stuff going on. But before we get into that, I want to address something, everything that's been going on in the world at the moment. I just wanted to read out just a little bit of something I feel I needed to say. It took me a while to post on social media because I honestly didn't know if it was my place as a straight white male to comment on events that I have absolutely no experience of. I didn't want to come across as insincere or merely copying a trend in a hobby that is an escape. I've had my mind changed by listening to and reading others' stories. I understand that as a member of a community who wants to see new people joining, that silence is more than just not getting involved. It's a lack of support for those who are affected, and as such can have a negative effect. This hobby has given me my best friends. It has allowed me to make friends with people I would otherwise never have talked to due to location or social groups or various other factors. The idea that we should expect some people to feel like this hobby isn't for them is one that I just can't understand, and I hope you feel the same. Like Games Workshop, I would rather lose those who don't believe in an inclusive hobby than help turn away those who would be made to feel like they aren't welcome. I'd like to welcome to the show Mr Steve Foote. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm grand. Thank you. So we're getting you on to have a little chat about your cosplaying adventures or your costuming. I was talking to someone else, and I asked her about her cosplaying stuff, and she said, "No, I'm a costumer." And I was like, you've got someone who's into it when there's they're breaking down the niches of the hobby into the correct terminology. I'm not 100% sure what the difference is, but hey ho, it's all fun.
No, it's just like anything, you start getting technical, and there'll be niches within niches within niches. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Never surprised with kind of how deep these things go. So a little bit of background on you as a gamer. We met at a South Coast GT, a Warhammer Fantasy event a number of years ago. I think the first time I met you was when you had your big Lizard Man display board.
Yes.
Me and my friends were walking around going, "Who's this nutter?"
Yeah, guilty as charged.
So you're known on the Warhammer Fantasy and now Age of Sigmar circles for your themed armies, should we say?
Yeah. I think for me, I love the background. I love what you can do within the games themselves. And it's just exploring what that means in a creative sense. So like you said, you don't need a display to go to an event, a tournament. But I took one anyway, because for me it was about sort of articulating what I thought the army was about.
Yeah.
And my day job, I'm designer and design consultant. So for me, it's creative solutions to things that need telling. So it's kind of the day job, I suppose.
Sure, yeah. And you've also got a 40k police force as well.
Yeah, again, just another example. And this isn't my line. It's Nick's from somewhere else. But for me, it's very much about gaming being the gaps.
Sure, yeah.
So that whole idea of we've got a world, we've got a lot of it clearly defined. We know what Space Marines are, and we know what Titans are. And for me, they've got heraldry, and they've got hierarchy and histories, books and books of history. Mm. But sometimes there's like something mentioned in a side chapter in a caption. And that's for me my fertile place to go and play and say, well, what does that look like? But knowing they've got to live within the laws and law of both types of the world we're in, but then that for me becomes a creative challenge. So yeah, that was what the police were all about.
Excellent. And essentially that's where we live in the Heresy, in that Heresy was born of a need to write background for 40k. And 1987 or whatever it was when it was first written, that Horus was thrown down in his rebellion, and however many iterations later, and all of a sudden we've got a 54-book series plus Siege of Terror plus other books. And that was essentially filling in those gaps in the story.
Yeah, pretty big gap, or it is a big. Yeah, it's full now. Yeah, and I think for me, when I go to watch, movies, it's not just sci-fi and fantasy. It's the ones where you get that storytelling that is compelling. You want to know more. These characters are really interesting, and they have faults. They make mistakes, and I think for me, yeah, I suppose. I used to play a reasonable amount of computer games, but in some ways, they almost seem constricting. You've got to go down this corridor and you've got to defeat this bad guy. For me, it's the games where you can talk your way out of trouble with the bad guy. And that kind of comes around where kind of most of my gaming started, which was good old Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, so you've been doing that a long time then, the old D&D?
Yeah, let me work it out.
We're talking Red Book. We're talking.
Yeah. So I'm a bit older than you, Dan. So, very quick story. I was in the Scout band, played the drums. It was gang show, probably about 1980.
Right.
And as the band were on the stage, you had to be there at the beginning of the performance. So we actually had to, but we only played it right at the end of the show. So we had to spend the whole performance. And because we had all our kit, they put us under the stage in a dark corner. And there was these two guys that I kind of knew of at Scouts, but we didn't go to the same school and stuff. And they were playing this game. And it's like, that looks cool. What are you doing? We're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Do you want to play? So for a week, for 2 hours a night, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons under the stage. And that was me hooked, really.
You're not selling the breaking that stereotype anywhere in that, Steve.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, and again, not too long after that, I got involved with. It wasn't called live role play back then. But that was the one where we end up in the castle in Cheshire, which was called Treasure Trap, which was one of the first organised ones.
Right, cool.
So. Yeah. Tick all the boxes.
That's whatever you enjoy. That's what it's about.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. So, obviously, a relatively young age when you took that up, and the love of storytelling was always there, and kind of grew.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of picked up. So a thread for me that really powerful, and most people probably heard of him, but maybe not read him, is H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a real eye-opener to get introduced to his work, in that it was very much about the unseen, the unknown. And for me, when it came to the role-play game, it was another kind of eye-opener, and actually most of the stats, especially the combat ones, which we're so used to with other games, are just a bit useless when you meet the big guy or the demigods or the minions or whatever. And for me, that became then the challenge of, well, how do we get out of this, or how do we get out of this and then try and convince anybody that it was real?
Yeah.
And I think for me, and especially I've done a reasonable amount of DMing, reffing, games mastering, whatever you want to call it. And for me, there's such a buzz when you get the players to a point where they go, oh no, that means this. Yeah. And it's like, yes, they got there, it's hard work, but it's super rewarding.
Yeah. And I think it's an important thing to do. So sometimes communities, as we say, niches of communities become quite insular. We saw that for quite a few years with 40k and Warhammer and Heresy as well coming along, where they looked at the other groups and all they could see were the negatives of why they didn't play that game and all that jazz. And I regularly, you always heard that, 40k players, they don't paint their toys and they do this and do that. And, and the hyper competitive guys didn't always do that. But actually, that was just the tip of the iceberg. And under the water, there were these people who had 30,000 points of their Space Wolf chapter at home, all painted up, every character named. And I think it's important. I do. It was 2 or 3 years ago, and it came from Adepticon, when a load of heresy guys kind of walked into the Age of Sigmar room and were like, "Wow, the level of hobby's really good here." And it's like, some people have been saying that for a while, and they were saying about Warhammer as well a little bit. We sometimes we're a bit insular in what we're looking at as a community, gaming community within the larger gaming community. And I think what we see with events you take part in and help run, Raw, for those guys who want a narrative, who like narrative, you're one of a handful of people who runs the Realms at War event, which is Games Workshop have talked about. Yep. And you've been on the TV to talk about as well. Yep. And you take part in Steve Wren's achievements, which I've talked about a couple of times on the show, where that blew people's minds when they saw some of the crazy stuff that was going on there. And there's a lot we can draw from each other.
And I think for me it's sometimes you need someone to wave the flag, and I think sometimes you've got to tune out some voices, if I can say that. There are certain people in the community that are quite loud, and that doesn't mean they're always right. So I think for me, what I always try and do whenever I hear something is just dig a bit deeper. And you can always, like you say, you can always find examples of people that have got, evolving 40k armies that, they've got a model from when they were a scout, then they became a Marine, and then they became a lieutenant. And it's the same name dude that's been gaming for years. I mean, wow, I've not done that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So I think it's, and to be honest, a lot of time those people are just happy in their clubs, happy with their group of mates, making their worlds.
Yeah, and I think almost by default, there is less of that at tournaments because of the nature of what a tournament is. And particularly when you look at events with cash prizes and things like that, then that certainly adds an extra encouragement to do well, doesn't it? So you will get less people at those events. Those people will then, as you say, sit in gaming clubs, in garages, and no one really knows about them.
And if an event is set out to saying we're playing match play, this points, these battle plans, they've set out the goal for that weekend.
Yep. And
they've said, this is what we're expecting you to do. And if people turn up looking to do that, then that's a win,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a successful event. And I think it is unfair of people to point fingers at people that take, you can hear it like, filthy lists or power lists or that sort of thing. It's like, dude, you've had the same books, the same rules, the same pack. Make choices, if you don't want to play at that level or you don't want to keep up, then play something else. I, in the same way, with Raw, we actively encourage people to bring all sorts of things they wouldn't normally bring, but we're still playing Age of Sigmar.
And I think what's happened recently is people have understood that the events have to be the driving force of that. The event pack essentially works as guidelines. So if you lay out your pack as a tournament, then people will treat it like a tournament in the main. Obviously, not everyone goes to a tournament hoping to win every game, or they want to win it, not expecting to win every game. They want to have fun. Yeah. But the more narrative and the more kind of you encourage these other things, and this is why I think Warhammer and Age of Sigmar, the paint level went up over the years I was doing it, is because all of a sudden even tournaments were saying, we expect your models to be painted. Don't expect them to be painted really well, but we expect you to put some effort into painting your models. There's an absolute... whoever writes the pack is laying out how
Yeah.
the event should run. And again, there are always that small percentage that go against that, but you can't win. You can't win everything, can you?
I mean, I think some kudos must go to GW for stepping up and creating matched narrative and open.
Yeah.
I mean, open still feels to be like anything that's not matched or narrative.
It's hard to define, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I think it's good. It's good to say that do whatever you like, because that should always be there. But I think that has definitely helped. I think people sharing their stuff, and I think overall as a community, especially on Twitter, there's people sharing all sorts of custom war plans, stories. People are writing books about their armies. And that just shows people what's possible. Not that you have to, but just what's possible.
Yeah.
And
I think we've got with new 40k, we're getting the what do you call it? What's it called?
Crusade.
Yeah. So
yes.
a narrative structure in that, which seems to be borrowing from Warcry, in that you can have your own narrative, which you then play against other people, which is possibly the best way of making sure that narrative doesn't stall in the way that a lot of campaigns do.
I think the exciting thing for me with that is that you could still be playing your thing when you're playing somebody else that's got their thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And because I think sometimes, someone says, I'll give you a game, Steve, but does it have to be super narrative? It's like, no, I can play match play too. But sometimes, but it takes the pressure off. We've both got the same mission.
Yeah.
We know what the objectives are. Mine is just because that objective looks like, my auntie's rocking chair that got stolen from 4 games beforehand. And that's why I really need that rocking chair back. As far as you're concerned, it's the 3-inch blip on the table, and that's what you're going to sit everything on. So I think for me, that's a really, really clever idea.
Yeah, and I think as a heresy community, as a heresy event organizer, I'm keen to look at, as a 40k player as well, who is choosing to play 40k in a mainly narrative style, or certainly a relaxed style of play. That it's big for that, but also I'm keen to borrow, beg and steal stuff from wherever I can find it for writing narrative events.
I think for me, one of the things that Raw enjoys is the fact that you will level up something. Depends what the theme of the year is, but you will level up something over the weekend. So you rock up. You start off as average, then you get next game, you get something. Win or lose, you get something. We don't want anyone running away with a super character where everybody else is still left on 3 wounds. And you get to shape that through the weekend. And if you're doing it narratively, you can pick the things that make sense from that battle. I got duffed up. I'm going to get better armor for the next one. That makes sense. Or whether you roll a dice, or whether you pick it because it suits the one you want. So I think that for me is where Crusade comes in as well. It's saying, you are going to grow you, and if you do that over an event, then it becomes a bunch of linked games, not these kind of isolated conflicts or encounters.
Absolutely, excellent. So, a bit of a tangent, all that, but I think what it does show is where you're coming from as a gamer. I think there's some good stuff in there to chat about as well. But recently, so as said, I first was aware of you definitely at an event where you brought a rather large, cool display board, and that's become one of your things. But over time, it went beyond the army, beyond the display board, and into a whole holistic approach to army creation, and you started dressing up. Did this start through the role playing?
Yeah, so the role playing was something. So there's a group of us that live all over the country, so it's not a regular weekly role play session. So we tend to have 2 or 3 weekenders during the year, and to that end, it will be arrive Friday night, game all day, all night Saturday, which will be the big event. and then Sunday is get up, recover, and drive home sort of thing.
Yeah.
And for those, we had a couple of people that joined that they're newer to role play. So rather than get into in-depth sort of D&D characters and all that kind of world and mechanics, we ended up doing Call of Cthulhu. But that's quite a lot simpler in that you can say, we're going to set it in this era, it's this time, and you guys are this type of characters.
On Earth, yeah.
And what happens is, the other thing is, it's like, rather than saying you're a dark knight of the 14th Order, and suddenly people got to craft armor and all those kind of things, which is what I'm moving towards now. But at the time, it was like, well, I can get an old shirt from the thrift store, the charity shop, and I can get some cheap plastic glasses off eBay for a couple of quid. But then, of course, people then start rolling up, and for me, it was fun things like we got set a game set up, which was just after the First World War, and we were all veterans of one kind or another. So it's like, okay. So completely lifted from Boardwalk Empire, the character that had the nasty face injury, and then he had the sort of porcelain face covering that was kind of connected to his glasses. So for me, you can pick something out there and go, okay, well, I'll take that idea. And mine was paper mache, nice and simple. But what you then get is you get a very visual, impactful thing that goes, oh, okay, I see what that is, and I think for me that's where it even goes back to the gaming. If you want a champion or a general for your army, you always make sure they're a bit taller and they got the bigger sword and the cape and the extra purity symbols. They're always that elaborate that draws your eye, and that's what we started doing with the cosplay or dressing up or fancy dress, whatever you want to call it, for those events.
Awesome. So that came out of this desire and your role playing to make it something a little bit more special, but enjoying those weekends.
Well, I mean, I think what we kind of did as well is we would, because they were eras in the real world, if we were playing, say, sophisticated 1920s, business people, we would all have Friday night as if we're cocktails at the hotel that we were going to be visiting. So it was all, we were all talking about, how's your week been and what's that, and is your mum all right, and all those kind of things. But you were dressed up and you had themed cocktails and you put some music on. And I think for me, that's where it kind of upped the level of the games master. And I think it then becomes much easier to actually for the players, because they've thought about their character before they've even got there.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how did I have this horrible face injury from First World War? Okay, well, there's that, and that. And then you meet somebody and you go, well, my dude wouldn't like you because you're an officer and you're at the back and I was at the front fighting in the thing. So, there's no alignment die roll to decide that. It's like, well, of course I would. So that makes it really good fun. Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. So it's playing into creating a character, but it is also almost a character creation process as well, because once you're interacting with the others, it becomes more of a thing. So how do you go from? So I can understand that with role play. I think many people will shudder at the thought of doing that, but obviously you're quite open to this kind of thing, and that's cool. How do you go from dressing up for a role play game to suddenly thinking, I'm going to turn up at a school in the southeast of England, and I'm not going to take my cap off for the whole Friday, which I thought was suspicious when you did it, and arrive on the Saturday morning in a Hessian smock and a monk's haircut and proper friar tuck cut and everything else?
So I suppose the biggest thing to blame here is South Coast GT.
Sure.
And what had become a kind of a highly fought trophy, which is Coolest Army. So Coolest Army Award is given out to an army. There's already a set of awards for Best Painted, and that's judged as by being, the not just the physical paint, but the color choices, and do they bring the army to life, and all those lots of details that go in to make a beautifully painted army. So you have a beautifully painted army, and it could look exactly like the box art that GW produced, or you can make your own. But then there's a kind of another side to the army builds, which is where they can be conversions, or they've all got feathers in their hats, or they're just, they're all very much of a narrative theme, so that they're not a competitive list. So in some ways they don't look quite as pretty because they're all monsters, rather than having that classical, you want your infantry at the front and then your cavalry and then your big things at the back. So you get this beautiful kind of, we're not talking golden section, but we are talking composing your army if you want to compete for best painted is a thing,
Yeah.
So for me, it was then I was compete because my painting skills are good, but I'm nowhere near good enough to go for best painted. Or to be truthful, I don't have the patience because the time that somebody spends on one of those armies, I would probably have wanted painted 2 armies, 2 display boards, some scenery, and a couple of outfits. So, so that's fine. And I've tried to paint models really, really well, and I really do understand now what it takes to get to that level. So huge kudos. But the idea with South Coast is that the coolest army was something that has a great theme or did something different. And I suppose for me, that's where I kind of saw a gap there where I could just go for it. And I think for me that year, I took a Sky Oak, which was from the lore, which is this sort of flying magical Sylvaneth tree, and that was flying. So I then make the whole idea of the army where it's all about the gardens and the Sylvaneth, obviously woodland creatures that have come to life, actually woods that come alive. There's tree men and dryads and stuff. So for me, I wanted to just move my army around in a wheelbarrow, and I was going to be a medieval gardener. So yeah, the proper bowl cut, which because the person who cuts family's hair is a friend, and she comes around. She made me confirm 3 times that it's exactly what I wanted.
She didn't want to get sued.
No, exactly. So, no, look. And I had photos printed out. This, just like this. I want a really crisp edge and then shaven. What bit like that? No, exactly that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think for me, it was just really taking that extension.
Sure.
What else is cool? And I think the other thing as well is when you play your games, even though you're playing the game with somebody who's with a match play environment, if I can bring things to life that make it fun and still give them a game that they feel is competitive and that they've won it, and that to be fair, they've won most of them. I don't really play to win. Give them the game, and I do know how to play the game. But in the same way, if I can make it fun at the same time, then I have a better time. And so,
I think that's most people's goal, is to play the game well enough, and also make it fun. And if you can do that every game, then that's winning at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, the time that I spend in projects, I could be spending in learning all the armies and learning all the combos and doing all that, so that I could definitely be better at the game. This just doesn't attract me.
Yeah.
If it's like the choice between saying, right, I need to make a gun for this weekender, cash is a bit short at the moment, let's go to the garage. Oh, look, there's an old bike seat post. Well, that's the barrel.
Yeah.
And then actually I can just get that plastic pirate gun off eBay for £4, and it's just the furniture that I want. It's just the brass bits. And then, it's not a film prop. You're not going to be able to throw it down the ship and fight everyone. It will fall apart. But for a weekend, so there's problem solving there in a way. How do I make something that's good enough without it being
sure? Without taking forever and costing the earth. Weirdly, I pushed South Coast to have that coolest army thing, and it wasn't quite the way I thought they'd go with it. but yeah, I was like, it's like, oh, they're finally doing Coolest Army, brilliant. And then people started showing up. I was like, I'm never going to win it. Didn't even get a nomination for my all-mounted Chaos Marauder list, which I thought was a bit harsh. But there we go. I'm not bitter about it 4, 5, 6 years later. It's fine.
It is a weird thing to judge.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because painting, there are certain, I think, once you get to the top end, it is quite hard to get between people. But there are some basics in painting that have got to be, stay within the lines, good color choices, clean basing, nicely presented. There's some basics there. A cool army could just...
Yeah. We're talking about 190 players, 180, 190 players at the peak of South Coast. So a lot of armies as well. But, whatever. It's all good fun. So you're looking, your initial kind of like Warhammer related was, as you say, a way of gaming the system of Coolest Army, taking it to the next level. Yeah. But you kept that fairly simple, and you spoke about, even with your role playing, staying pretty simple with that. You've progressed since then. So what I've seen the Gardener. I'm trying to remember what else I've seen. I've seen. Did you do some for your Tomb Kings as well? Did you put the Explorer's hat on?
Yeah. So I had a Fez which I painted and some bits and pieces. So that was pre-Gardener. But that was early signs of madness.
Sure. But this year's Blood and Glory, or last year's Blood and Glory, should I say, you took things a step further. And I think some proper cosplaying was involved.
I'm going to blame the internet, if that's all right.
Always.
So some real inspirations for me. Probably the biggest one for me is Tested channel.
Right.
Oh, I've gone blank now. Adam Savage.
Okay.
So he's the guy, one half of Mythbusters.
Yep. I recognise the name.
So his Tested channel is now about all the things that he loves doing. There's a bunch of them on there, but he kind of leads it. But he makes props, gadgets, cosplay. And for me, watching him, he's got a fully fitted workshop with a lathe and 3D printers and laser cutters and all of the joyous things you'd want. But just fascinating to watch, and he's really engaging. And that kind of tripped me on to Bill Duran from, I've got his page open. He's from Punished Props Academy.
Okay.
His YouTube channel. Very much lots of weapons, but some garments as well. But the real tripping point for me was Kamui Cosplay YouTube channel and everything. The couple there, Fletzlana, I mean, just the stuff they do with foam was amazing. And all those channels break it down, show you how to do it. And it was like, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to see what. And by picking Skaven to do, there was a lot of wiggle room in finish and what you can get away with, if that makes sense, rather than something like, doing a Space Marine armor or anything that's, engineered in itself, then demands a certain amount of skill and engineering in the model making, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
So for me, Skaven was like, okay, there's some wiggle room there. If something's a bit wonky, then Warpstone did it, right? So you can, I learned a load, watch the videos, you get the right materials in, which is not too expensive. I still didn't really wait for the contact glue to dry quite enough in a few places, and should have got 10 mil instead of the 5 mil for those bigger bits. But for me, as much as anything, it's about, you can watch so many videos, but it's not until you actually do it yourself that you realize, but I mean, it's, Kamui, if you want to look at it, I mean, some of the stuff they make, I'd suggest that they this is me with my total lack of real knowledge in cosplay, but a lot of their stuff is very much from computer games.
Yes.
So the look and finish on much of their stuff is quite computer gamey. It's very clean. It's weathered, but it's quite clean. I think for me, I see, Warhammer as being very much dirtier and grittier and nastier and stuff. So, but all of the actual processes are still valid. It's just the finish that you choose.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was one of those things where you've gone on the internet, gone on a deep dive, and then started to think, I can do something more. Because, I mean, we're talking about, so you came as a Warlock engineer. And, as I say, a full costume. Everything was there, like you would expect to see walking around something like San Diego Comic-Con. We're not talking.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but we're not. There is a difference in I'm going to dress up as a guardsman and do it well, and I'm going to take the time to make all this stuff. You understand what I mean? Of course, you can do guardsman and go that full length, but if I was to do my first cosplay as a guardsman, it would be fatigues and blah blah blah, and my first cosplay I wouldn't be getting foam or doing anything like that. But so what made the decision? Was it literally just, I've seen what these people are doing, why not have a go?
Yeah, I guess it was. And I think the other thing is I could make these armor plates as components that I could Velcro onto myself, so it wasn't like a proper suit of armor. If you again go back to the reference, the engineers, the Skaven warlords and stuff, they've got armor on, but they're sort of always part of their robes and stuff. I do have to give a massive shout out to Gary at Dark Fantastic Mills, because he'd made the glaive, the warp glaive, as a trophy for which he offers out to events. So for me, that was like an instant win. So I didn't actually make that. I got Gary printed that out for me, sent me the parts. I put it together and painted and weathered it. So I think, in many ways, when you've got something like that, or the other weapons that I've made, the weapons are these real standout pieces that allow the viewer to say, yeah, Steve, you're a bit big and probably a bit paunchier than a normal Skaven would be, but you've actually got this massive warp glaive, which tells me you're a Skaven. And obviously, the other bits help as well. So I think for me, getting the weaponry right just kind of gives you that visual anchor that you go, Space Marine, yes, or you go, you're Talan. I can tell that because you actually got all the headdress right, and you've got all that right. So I think for me, that's the trick. It's picking out those elements that just tell your story.
Sure, actually, and I think you're right there. I think, and that's probably a little bit of the designer in you, understanding that you could have a really bad costume of a Space Marine, but if you've got the pauldrons, the gun, the helmet, then it's a Space Marine.
Yeah. So
there are ways. Like we talk about painting. You paint the bases, faces, and shields, and you can get away with a lot on the rest of the model if you've got those key components. Obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious with all that, but the principles there, that those things do stand out.
I think one of the things I found, you kind of think, well, I've got that armor panel and I've got that and I've got this, and you think, yeah, that's all good, and you put it on, and suddenly there's these huge spaces that you kind of go, oh, it's not much going on there. Oh, it's not much going on. What can I do? And yet, I mean, the other key thing is you kind of got to be able to move around in it.
Yeah.
Got to put my keys to the car somewhere.
Yeah. Or you've got to have the person following you around like the Space Marines do at Warhammer Fest. And if they want to go to the toilet, it's a 20-minute process and all that jazz. And if fair play, but think about whether you want to be doing that or not.
Yeah, and I think for me, I suppose, would I want to go to Comic-Con and dress up? In the past, I probably said I'd love to go, but I don't know that I'd want to dress up. But having done it, I was a little bit nervous because Blood and Glory, because it was kind of full on. It wasn't just a t-shirt with a logo on.
Yeah.
But everyone was in great spirits and had a laugh, and it was good. It was quite hot though, I have to say.
I can imagine. So yeah, just catching that. So when you first started to dress up, I say you're gardener.
Yeah.
Were there points after you got your haircut on the drive down where you thought, what have I done?
I suppose at that stage I knew a whole bunch of people
Sure.
on the scene, so it wasn't like me going to Comic-Con because no one would know me, sort of thing. So I suppose I kind of knew I had I hoped it had some friendly faces.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I guess.
But the Skaven one, then you've gone further, but you're also in a room where I'm guessing you don't know the 40k crowd as well, and there are a lot of 40k players there, a lot of Heresy players there. You said you're kind of nervous of what to expect. What were the reactions when you were doing it?
Everyone was just really cool. So they looked great, had a laugh, kind of have a picture with you, which was kind of a bit of a moment. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm a cosplayer now. Surprisingly, I no inappropriate requests, so that was fine.
That's a shame.
But I think people, people found it amusing, and I think I was coming out of the narrative room, so that probably explains a lot of it.
Sure. So you're there, and people. Is that a little bit of a drug when you got people doing that? Was that a bit of a hit?
So yeah, I mean, I was quite. It's weird. I'm not necessarily the most gregarious person.
Sure.
I'm not always the big parties and stuff. I'm not always the center of attention, telling amazingly witty stories or anything. But dress up like an idiot or do something outrageous, I suppose you could say I'm hiding behind it. I don't know. I don't do the psychology. I'd be here all night. But yes, you're absolutely right. I like the buzz of people having a laugh. Like the year that I did the Team Kings, and I put it all in a box that looked like the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
And moving from table to table, I had to ask my opponent to come and help lift it, and we put 2 wooden sticks in it, and we moved it around. Well, of course that grabbed attention. You can't help but do it. But for me, it's part of the fun of it.
Sure.
And I don't think anyone, was miffed about it. They were just like,
absolutely.
You're a bit crazy. Let's have a game. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Literally, I'm just kind of just looking at it like, as I say, I've actually started thinking about doing a bit of cosplay a couple of times, and the where's, what's, and how's, and all that, and why am I doing it as well was a little kind of thought in my head, and I suppose there is an element of some of the things you talked about actually through there, and just thinking it's cool. I mean, I've got a lot of friends when I go to some of these places as well, so I do feel a little bit safe in kind of doing that, and I know that's harder for some other people. But so I want to go back. So you've decided to make this Skaven thing, and was it literally like, I'm going to go on the internet and find out how to do it?
Yeah, I suppose I'd been watching these things anyway without just interested in the whole processes,
sure,
and materials and people's design approaches to it. Kamui definitely make cardboard templates that they can offer up, and then from there that then transfers into flats, which then get traced around the foam. So for me, it's kind of like, that's a really interesting process. Could I use that for making hills for the tabletop? There's this crossing over this stuff. But yeah, I suppose the more I saw it, I thought, I could do that. I guess so. Every sort of project I do a little bit, and you talked about the police force, the abatis that I've had. One of the things for me for that was, if I do the police, they've got to have flashing lights, flashing LEDs. And it's just finding, what can I do in this next project that I haven't done in the past? What can I test myself on? So, the Sky Oak had fiber optics, so that was the waterfall lit up. So I think for me, it's then I've got for the Bone Haulers, which is the one that was supposed to be going to South Coast before it got cancelled, but that's got electric motors that do different things in it. Nice. So for me, it's much as much as testing myself, and I think that's definitely what the cosplay is. It's how do I test myself? And I think one of the things as well is I've got a 3D printer now. I've had it for about a year and a half, and it was things like looking at the Skaven outfit, and it was like there's a bit of a gap there. It was like, well, on my smaller printer, I can definitely print some warp stones that I can have a hole through it that can go on a bit of rope around me. So I can just print those out, spray them up, dry brush them, and they've got some big chunky bits of green on there. So it goes back to your painting, how do I make sure this thing isn't just all drab and grey? How do I make sure there's elements picked out? So a bit of warp stone here, a bit of warp stone there, and suddenly it looks like a hole. It looks like the miniature.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool. I think there's a few points in that. So first off, you've got this art understanding of art, of design, should I say? Which has helped. It sounds like it's helped. Like the way you're picking stuff up. I don't think everyone would quite pick up a random piece of something in the garage and think, yeah, that would do that. So there's probably, I'm certain you've trained for years, and you can look at. I know Brandon. I can't remember his name now.
Palmer.
The guy who manically paints armies for Adepticon. Yes, something like that. He every year before Adepticon, he goes into second-hand shops and says, "This will be the base of my new army," and he's pulling stuff out, and you're like, "I have no idea what you're doing," but that's an extension of that same kind of process where you can see something and understand how you're going to utilize it, which I don't think everyone has to the same level. So I think there is a skill, something to be learned in looking at stuff and the way it can be used.
Yeah, I have to say, for me, car boots.
Sure.
And again, sometimes it's walking around and you've got to keep in your mind the shapes that you want.
Right.
Because they may not be the thing that you see.
Sure.
So you think I need a gun, but you end up buying a bicycle pump.
Yeah.
And it's making sure that, I don't need a kid's gun. I just need a cylinder with a tube with some texture on it. And it's not always easy because you buy something off eBay, like, a nozzle, and you think, brilliant, and it turns up and it's 3 times the size that you really need it to be. So it's like, I'll turn it into something one day.
Yeah.
More mess in the garage, my wife would say. But I think it can be hit and miss. But
awesome. Yeah. So I think that's for you. That was certainly been something that you've utilised, and as maybe people progress in cosplaying, that's something that becomes more important as the things get more kind of involved, as it were, moving forwards. But you talked about going online, and I looked up Kamui Cosplay, and there's some awesome stuff on there. But they sell books about how to do it, and I you know what? It doesn't surprise me that they sell books on how to do it, but I didn't think about it until that point. But there's where to go and buy materials and all that stuff. And I knew that if I went and looked, I could find these things, but to have it in one place is quite interesting. And were the other sites you looked at similar in how free and open they were?
I think free and open in techniques, and some of them are quite lengthy. The way you build up weathering and why you should use one thing over another. So I think the whole techniques thing is huge. I think the books. I think especially when you start going into more complicated stuff, when you're programming Arduinos to control LEDs and things like that. That looks fantastic. It's stunning. You talk about something that catches the eye. You've got a headdress which lights from front to back and back again. And that's not too difficult. you know, a little Arduino board isn't too expensive, and you can reuse it. Programming it, there's lots of stuff out there that you can take and combine. And so I think, I think it is really good. And if you are looking to do it, and I think the other thing to do as well is, you know, when you get the, you know, more organized and professional cosplayers, they don't have garages full of junk that they can go and find stuff. They buy in the right material, you know, 2-inch PVC tubing, because that makes a great bolter barrel or whatever. So people can go out and find that and buy that, you know, and I mean, these things can add up, you know, to be fair.
Yeah, and if someone's starting out, the chances, well, you know, some people do go whole hog into these things, but a lot of other people will think, you know, if I'm doing my first ever cosplay, do I want to sink X amount of money in, not knowing how I'm going to feel about it as we go through and how well it's going to turn out? So, you know, and that's, you know, just something I kind of was thinking about. Like, you don't want to break down those, you don't want to be putting people off right at the start by fear of cost and effort in that respect.
And the other thing I've really not tackled at all is sewing in any shape or form.
Right.
My wife can do that, and she's been really cool and helping me out. The outfit which I did for last year, where I was Dracothfoot, I was one of the lords that was leading the two factions.
Yeah.
Mitzi played the other. I mean, that literally was a couple of pairs of curtains, but I kind of said, look, it needs to be kind of pinched up and flowy. I'm a nobleman. And there's these rich carpets, curtains that I ordered off Amazon. And she just managed to stitch them up in the right way, that you had these sort of gathers on them.
Yeah.
And then whacking great big wooden sword that I'd finished. Again, so the other thing you've got to be prepared with is you watch somebody on YouTube and they say, right, so you just paint this sword blade gloss black, and then you just give it a buff, and then you just put graphite powder on, and suddenly, ka-shing, and you go, amazing, I can do that.
Yep.
Get some graphite powder, put it on there, it's like, it's just black with some silver streaks on it. What? And so you go, well, I'll try something else. Eventually you kind of find how it works. And of course you do all that, and it's taken you all afternoon to get it. And then you look at it and you go, yeah, I really should have had a smoother finish to start with, because I can see every dent in that now because it's reflecting like a mirror. But you just kind of go, that's good enough. That's great. You know, everybody else will look at it and go, that looks like it's metal with some wooden things in it, but it looks like it's metal. And you go, good enough. But now, next time when I go to do it, I'll know, you know, surface preparation is everything. So
yeah, and these are, you know, if you learn any new skill, you have to be prepared to have things not work out, and you have to be prepared to learn and prepared to fail sometimes, and maybe have to restart an item or something like that, because you're new.
Yeah, and I think the satisfaction when it all comes together, and you go, yeah, I'm happy with that. It's things I would have done differently, but that works. And also for me, deadlines are key, because you know, it keeps you focused. Yeah,
and makes you sweat. Awesome.
So then, Greg, I'm asking you a question here. Sorry, podcasting counterattack. What's enticing you to be then? What do you fancy being?
Well, I don't really want to talk about it, just in case I do it. I do want to keep it quiet just in case. I did have a talk with a couple of chaps at a recent event, and it was put around there, and I think it was one of those things that was put out there and then will disappear. But it's been in the back of my head for 8 months now, and right. I was going to try and get something done, but so I have none of the skills that you've talked about. None of them. My wife will be prepared to sew and do things like that. I can't design 3D printing files. I'm not very good at designing, period. And I've been looking around at the simple ways of doing things, and you know, sometimes that just costs money. And then I'm like, how much do I want to spend doing it? That kind of thing. It's Imperium based. It's 40k based. There are a lot of things like, all of a sudden you start thinking, well, I need some leather. Okay, right. Okay. I've, not even thought about ever working with leather before. At least I've tried to sew. I was terrible at it, but at least I've tried to do that. What do I do with leather? That kind of thing. And can I purchase it in a way that I don't have to do much with it, or am I going to go somewhere and try and learn something? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I've thought about various things before. I've done a bit of LARPing in the past, not a huge amount. But even at something simple like dressing up as a barbarian with a fur cloak on, something like that. I'm not adverse to having a go at something like that. And for some reason, there's a little bit of that urge in me. Maybe it's just the show off. Maybe for me, it's just a bit of the ego.
Yeah,
because some we all have different drivers, and as I say, if you've got a podcast, you've got an ego. So, some level,
I don't know what you mean.
I've had many podcasters try to tell me they have no ego, but so maybe there's a little bit of that, but something a bit different. So, maybe we'll talk offline about it. But okay, cool. That's really good. I think that gives an insight into kind of one man's journey into cosplaying.
So I'll share something that never got done. It may still get done, but sure. This was going to be my cosplay for South Coast this year. So a very quick bit of background. It was for my Bonehaulers army, which is a Caradron Overlords army. Yep. Based on a very simple premise that in Age of Sigmar, there's an army called the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, and they go around. They're a kind of lawful evil, if you want to call it that. And they go around and they say, basically, this city, you owe us a tithe of so many tons or bags or whatever their metric is. You owe us this much bone, because they use that to then rebuild themselves and build other versions of them. And if you can't fulfill the tithe, they'll ravage the city and take the bone anyway. So my idea was with the bone haulers is that they would go and find bone out in the wilds, cut it up, saw it up, turn it into ingots, and then sell it to whoever's in the shtuck, because they've got the bone reapers coming to their door and they're short on their tithe. So It became very much a business-based system. They were very much organized like a company. Yeah. You had a sales team, you had the cutting teams, the hauling teams, the processing teams. So my plan was the thought of actually trying to make the armor that would match the Caradron Overlords. I mean, there's very elaborate, fully fitted masks, which would be pretty unpractical for a whole weekend's wargaming. So my twist was to go to the flip side of it, and that was to say, well, what if I was Steve that worked for the Bone Haulers, rather than I'm a Duardin, Sky Duardin. So that was me in work boots, cargo trousers, proper workman cargo trousers, tool belt. It was going to be polo shirt with the logo on, yellow hard hat because all my guys have got yellow helmets. And then what I've made, but not printed yet, is I've made 3D models of the rivet guns. So a pair of rivet guns hanging off my tool belt. So it's kind of another way of doing it, but it would have bone haulers on the back. And the idea was that if I saw somebody playing against bone reapers, I'd go and give them a business card to say, if you need any help, then these are the people for you. So again, it's little things like that, which would be fun. Again, you'd stand out with a yellow hard hat on all weekend. So again, I think it's different ways of skinning it. It doesn't always have to be page 42 of the Codex. That's the person I'm going to be.
Yeah, looking at the stories that lie in between what we read about, because no matter how much they write, they can't cover everything.
Exactly, and I think we're getting so many extra cool stuff. Blackstone Fortress. I mean, many of the minis that we get in that, hugely elaborate and extravagant, rogue traders and priests and stuff that would just be great fun to do.
Yeah. There's a whole host, and there aren't many universes this big when you look at what the wealth of content that Games Workshop have put out over 30 odd years. It's pretty huge. So yeah, there's always plenty of space to play in, which is perfect, absolutely perfect, and we love it for that. Before you go, so we've talked a little bit about some of the projects you've done with armies and stuff like that as well. As I say, you're well known on the Age of Sigmar scene for having fun with your army concepts and everything else, and you've taken that a step further, haven't you? You've got a Patreon, and just tell us a little bit about your project on that kind of thing.
So Patreon for me is a place, because my nature, unless I've got a massive deadline, I will see a documentary on the telly and go, oh, I want to make some models for that, and I'll start that. So I can't really share that on Twitter because they would just be these little pop-ups that would be kind of meaningless.
Yeah.
So for me, Patreon was a way of sharing those and being able to put more words in it. But by using the tagging of Patreon, it allows me to put up things as I think of them, that people can then come along and just click the tag and see the whole flow of it. And what's been really exciting, and much more than I imagined, is I do ask questions, and people come back and said, "What about this and this, or what about a better idea?" It's like, "Yeah, that's cool, brilliant, that's great." And you would get that on Twitter as well, because the community is really good there. But it's kind of there forever.
Yes.
Rather than, there's so much stuff on Twitter that unless you tag it or take it away, I've wanted to keep it super accessible in the sense that you can get everything for $2 a month. So hopefully, that's not a massive ask. And yes, the money does definitely help for some of the bigger projects and some of the stuff that's going on. So, but I think for me, it was another experiment, test myself. How do I make this work? How do I make sure I share the right stuff in the right way? Ask the questions. What do people want? In the same way, I've been messing around a bit on YouTube, nothing serious. Ultimately, with these things, as you know, Dan, you've got to commit to them and you've got to keep doing them. And for me right now, the hobby's enough. Plus recording with Dan as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go onto the Patreon. You can see examples of projects you've done before, but also you had a sketchbook come out of madcap ideas and things like that. And I think it's for people who are looking to go that little bit further with their army, to look beyond their army and showcasing that kind of thing. Then I think there's a lot of valuable resources to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to footworks.co.uk, there's a project vault there, and I don't know, there's 50 odd pictures of some of my other projects. So that's free. You can just go there and have a look. And I think, that kind of shows everything from toilet roll guns to outfits to everything. And then the Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/footworks. Just to be clear, foot is FOOTE works. So, but yeah, so for me, sharing is the same as dressing up, really. It's great to get people's feedback, and actually you often end up with something better than you thought you would because of the help and stuff that people give you. So it's cool.
Yeah, and just engaging with other people. I think sometimes it's easy to forget how much value there can be in just discourse with a variety of people.
And also the skills that they have that you'd never knew about.
True.
All the access to a piece of kit that you said, well, why didn't you say you needed a laser cutter? I've got one. We can, we'll print that. We'll get that cut out for you. Oh, brilliant! That's great. Thank you very much. So, and the flip side, somebody will come to me and say, Steve, I'm thinking about this project of this. Have you got any thoughts? And you go, yeah. Have you thought about this, or this? And they go, oh, well, that wouldn't work, but this is good. Great. And I think for me, that's the creative nature of the hobby and the people that are involved.
And the when we talk about having a community, There are different ways to be part of a community. You can go onto Facebook and just joining the odd chat here and there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for some people, sometimes you find that thing which is that little bit extra, which engages, say, a community, and then you get your own community within that community, or you just engage with more people in that community, and there's worth in that as well. So brilliant. Yeah, I'll put all these links in the show notes anyway. And you're on Twitter as well, aren't you? At Tin Racer Steve?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so I'll put that in there as well. And then for people who love a bit of 40k and a bit of the less competitive aspect of 40k, you do a 40k podcast with Dan, don't you?
I do. Ashes of the Imperium.
Yeah, which is a good fun listen with, as I say, it's not that you don't ever talk about how good units are, but your focus is very much on enjoying the game first and foremost.
The good thing is Dan's got a lot more gaming understanding and units and all that stuff. But then I'll ask him silly questions and he'll have a smart answer, and hopefully people learn something. But yeah, I think for us it's definitely Dan is such a project butterfly. So for him, exploring armies is just half fun listening to that half the time.
Yeah, but I think it's certainly the kind of show that I like for 40k, and indeed for wargaming. Now my days of trying to compete to be the best Warhammer player are long gone. Some might say they were never there. But I did win a major event. I got my 100 points once. But yeah, so it's the kind of, in the similar vein to the independent characters, in that it's a community kind of overall look at the game without necessarily focusing too much on cutting edge, whilst also not ignoring what's good in the game and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And why is it good? And also, why is it good for storytelling? And I think hopefully that mix is good. Yeah, no, I mean, there's loads of people doing amazing stuff out there, which is, blow by blow, meta, this combo with this combo. We got our own space. Yeah, that's it. Everyone, each to their own, as they say. Well, wonderful. Thank you for coming on, man. It's been a really good chat. Yeah, it's great. And great to catch up. You never know, maybe we'll get you on again another day. Yeah, brilliant. Cheers, Dan.
What's a Geek Shield? Is it like a Breacher Shield?
Not exactly. Geek Shield is an insurance service giving you hobby rewards along the way. We appreciate that life insurance is a bore, so we wanted to make things a little more exciting with rewards that matter to you. Cool, right?
Okay, so why life insurance? I have feel no pain. Isn't that enough?
Very different thing. Life insurance can be used to settle off your mortgage, help with raising your children, or cover your funeral costs. It's never going to save you, but it will save your loved ones from financial disaster. Here's what some of our customers have to say.
Pete really will give his all to try and find a better policy for cheaper and give you vouchers. Why would you not do it?
It's great to know I have security for my family. Of that, I am certain.
Thanks to Geek Shield, my wife now questions if I'm still worth more alive.
Thanks to Geek Shield, I get to murder my family in the name of the dark gods and get all the money.
Yeah. So head over to geekshield.co.uk to book your free consultation today. Terms and conditions apply. Geek Shield is not a physical shield, nor will it save you from the primordial annihilator.
I would like to welcome Mr. Dan Palfrey onto the show. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me, mate. I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent stuff. So, listeners of the show, we have talked about one of your armies on the show before. Photos seen of it as well at the latest. The last time I was in Cardiff.
Yeah, that's right.
Your Demons of the Rune, your Malal Demons of the Rune Storm, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
So, let's start a little bit with you, I suppose. When did you pick up Heresy?
Well, Heresy specifically, I picked it up about 2014, I think it was, 2015. I've always been into 40k, since second edition. I always loved the Heresy, so it's been the main thing I've really been interested in, picking up the Black Library books and little sort of scraps of information and all the different codexes, chaos codexes and things. And I think it was about 2014. One of my friends decided that it was time for me to get back into playing 40k or 30k, and he ended up clubbing together with some mates, and they bought me Angron for my birthday. So I was pretty chuffed with that, and thought, well, I may as well start a world design, didn't I, to go with him? And yeah, I did. And actually, it wasn't long after that then that the Calth box was released. So I kind of had to go 2 feet first, really. I bought 2 boxes each and didn't look back.
Almost perfect timing.
It was.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you've been in the hobby, like in and out of the hobby for a while before that?
Yeah,
or?
Since I was like about 9, I think. So yeah,
Sure.
it's a second edition. I had the second edition box. And then, I remember my mum not being too happy because the third edition box came out not long after that. And she had to buy me another one. But yeah.
Okay. Cool. And so I've kind of asked you to come on here because you're one of the people who's involved, or involved at the beginning, should I say, of the Isstvan project.
So we returned to Isstvan, yeah.
Yes. So,
Right,
so I think Miles kind of teased us a little bit about something coming up, and it was obviously this. Well, he talks about it a little bit, but so just remind us again, how exactly did this start? What is the Isstvan project?
So Return to Isstvan is the name, the hashtag Return to Isstvan we're using to kind of coordinate all our sort of efforts with this. Well, it all started really when we were watching the Warhammer previews, like a lot of people I'm sure did. We were kind of sat on Messenger, having a little chat about watching these things live coming up, and then out of the blue, then they previewed the Soul Targets model. So we were all pretty excited. Finally, this guy's getting a model. And the chat sort of turned to, well, if he's coming out, what if we did Isstvan 3? Actually went back and played the campaign, because we've all got the books, we've all read the books, book 1 particularly, it's got a really good campaign system. We never actually played the campaigns through properly like we should have done. And that kind of snowballed, and then eventually actually there was enough of us in our group, in our little gaming group, that wanted to do it. We thought, yeah, come on, let's do it. So we all kind of drew straws and picked armies and went from there. And it turned out that at the same time as all this, some of the guys over at Crusade and Heresy were planning something very similar. Miles, being a bit of a go-between between the two groups, ended up pulling us together. And we've all decided to pull it together and do it as one large group over Facebook and over Instagram. Okay,
that's cool. Yeah, and as you say, sparked by seeing a new model that came out and remembering that actually, these big black books have campaigns in them.
They do, and we haven't played them enough. They deserve to be played, so that's the plan. It was kind of a lockdown project, right? So we'll get an army going while we're all off work and able to put a bit more time into it. And then when hopefully we're back up to normal and being able to meet up again, we can actually have some games.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a happy coincidence of, well, I say happy, a convergence of things happening at the same time that allow something like that to happen.
Absolutely.
So where did you diving on this? Did you have a legion set out from the start, or?
Well, I've already got a World army, a massive traitor World army, and that's themed around Isstvan 5. So I didn't really want to do World again. And so basically, one of my other friends shotgunned Death Guard. I'm not going to play a loyalist, so that left me with either Emperor's Children or Sons of Horus. And the minute the S word came out my mouth, Miles was like, "I'm playing Sons of Horus," so he shotgunned those straight away. So that left me with the 3rd Legion, which I'm actually really happy with because it's a really different paint scheme to what I normally paint.
Sure.
And yeah, it's actually given me a really big challenge. If they play differently, they look differently, so it's going to be really interesting to put them together.
Cool. So we've got this idea that yes, let's go back to book 1. Let's look at these 4 legions, and maybe some Mechanicum and some other bits and pieces as well that we know are there. Was it immediate that you put some restrictions in there, or was it, how free form was this? How controlled was this? Is this something that you guys all were like, if we're going to do this, let's have a focus, or let's just run with those legions and Isstvan?
Yeah, 100%. It was all about the narrative for us. We wanted something that we could really go to a lot of detail about and really look at what units were there, what units weren't there, what kind of markings might they have had, what colour was the dust of Isstvan 3 after the virus bomb. We really wanted to make this as accurate to the fluff as possible, because we've all got armies where we've kind of gone for the meta and gone for the Spartans and the psychic powers and all the whatever else. So this way it allows us to just actually I think someone described it really well in our group as making it look like a Black Library novel cover,
Sure.
with just hordes and hordes of just basic tactical marines slamming into each other as much as possible. So, yeah, we've gone for a Centurion list using the Mournival rules, which are a fantastic rule set to start with. And then maybe if it really takes off and we get going, we might build up to larger scale forces. But for now, we're looking at 1,500 points Centurion. And yeah, some of the guys over at Crusade and Heresy are looking at going from maybe 2K, 3K eventually.
Sure.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, for now, 1,500, as accurate in the narrative as possible.
Okay, yeah, that's a really cool idea. And as you say, Centurion restricts a lot of those things that would draw it away from the original kind of scope of what the heresy is supposed to be about, which is mass ranks of legions, of warriors, legionaries, which, by nature of having to have cool things, I think we lose a little bit. And maybe the game itself doesn't encourage it as much as other games, could do, or maybe this game could do.
No, it doesn't. And it does require a bit of community sort of pulling together and signing up to these kind of contracts, I guess, of what we want to try and achieve. And thankfully, everybody in the group has so far been on board with it. And yeah, no one's looking at trying to bring Leviathans or anything sneaky like that.
Sure. So is the idea then that this accumulates? So you're in Cardiff.
Yeah, that's right.
And you've got a group in Cardiff. The Crusade and Heresy guys are a little bit more spread out, I would assume.
Yeah, I think they were saying a lot of the guys started off in Swansea, but some of them are more based up in the north, now Manchester area.
Yes.
My gaming group is all in Cardiff, cool. with the Cambrian Synod. So maybe we'll when lockdown's over, we'll hopefully maybe meet up at Warhammer World or have some kind of central spot where we can all meet up and have a big game. But certainly for us, we're looking at going to our local gaming club, Firestorm, having a few games there when we're able to.
So I live in the southeast of England, below London, and there's just no gaming stores that can hold more than like two gamers at any one time. And every time I go to Cardiff and I sit there and think, I'm not a city person, but I could live in Cardiff.
Cardiff's a pretty cool town. I mean, we're very lucky to have somewhere like Firestorm, which they're a massive gaming area. They're really nice guys there as well. And they've got a fantastic shop as well. So yeah, we're really, really lucky to have them all back.
And within walking distance of civilization, unlike some of the other big gaming centres around.
Yeah, definitely. It's right next to the Central train station in Cardiff. I can drive there in 10 minutes. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, parking and even if you just want to go into town, it's it's 10 minutes walk if that. So depending on how drunk you are, obviously, and everything else. So yeah, I'm mega jealous of having Firestorm on your doorstep. So how many guys have you got in your group that are looking at doing this then?
So contributing to the project in our group, there are 7 of us altogether.
All right, cool.
So most of our guys are involved, and we have a little sort of Facebook group going with the Crusade and Heresy guys, and there's about 30-ish people I think in that group at the moment.
Awesome. So that's a really strong start. Bearing in mind it's only you're pretty limited to the forces you can choose from. 4 legions and some Mechanicum bits. It's essentially, isn't it?
It is pretty much. Yes. So the 4 legions that were there. You've got Sons of Horus, World Eaters, Emperor's Children, and Death Guard. Obviously, loyalist and traitor versions of each of those. There's a Dark Mechanicum, or just Mechanicum, I guess, on the traitor side, and then an Order Reductor, I think, force on the loyalist side. In Book 1, it does talk about, towards the end of the war as well, some sort of cult and militia and Davenite priests coming in. So there's some scope to do a bit more chaosy bits there if you wanted to. But yeah, really, it's those 4 legions we're kind of focusing on. Yeah,
so that's pretty cool that you've got that. I'm also a little bit jealous of having a community that even 7 people are willing to commit to that in a local area, because that, I think, a lot of people listening to this will be like, well, I can't do that. But it's something that's, so you guys put it out, and Miles particularly, obviously, he's everywhere on the internet.
He is, isn't he?
So becomes a bit of a figurehead for these things. I purposely tried not to have him on to talk to him more about it. He talks enough. So you've got your groups doing this, but you've made it a public thing. Was that kind of was that driven by the people like Miles? Yeah, Miles is out there and doing his thing. Lex is quite vocal online about showing what he's up to and like that as well. Was that driven by those guys, and was it something that everyone was really keen to kind of have going?
I think, everybody has got an Instagram account these days, haven't they? Especially in our community, everyone's posting their models. So just transferring it into an Instagram kind of social community thing was very easy because everyone's going to be posting pictures of their models anyway. So we thought, well, why don't we use a shared hashtag so that we can coordinate all these kind of disparate groups together. We can all find each other's work much easier. And then actually, if people wanted to get involved, even if they aren't in our gaming group or can't get to us to play, they can still feel involved. They can still send their whips to us and their pictures. So, we all love seeing awesome painted models. So any excuse to increase the number of those around is quite happy to see.
Yeah, there is something. I don't quite know what it is, but podcasters have it. YouTubers, people who run events, and people who do things like this. There is something about putting something out there and finding a community attaching itself to it that it's really hard to replicate.
Well, I've always been one that enjoys creating these kind of things. Like I was always the dungeon master in D&D growing up. I enjoy putting on campaigns. I enjoy running, like yourself, I'm sure, running these things where people can run with what you've got and actually take it much further, and you end up getting a much more enriching project at the end of it.
Yeah, it fully depends how much effort's involved for me.
Yeah.
Because some of these things do take a lot of effort. But yeah, there is, and it is sometimes it's personality type. Obviously, I think, if you have a personality that's driven that way, but there are people who are on the fence sometimes with a little bit, I thought about doing something like this. And I think what you see is, from what I've seen so far of Return to Isstvan, it's Isstvan. It's well organised and well kind of publicised. Like it's not overly publicised, but it's done in the right manner. And
we didn't want to be ramming it down everyone's throats and saying, look what we're doing. That's not what it's about at all. It's about saying, look, we really love this hobby. And also, it kind of came about at a time when they announced 9th edition, right? Games Workshop announced this new edition. And as much as we love the lore and the history of 40k, it's not really the thing we're keen on right now. We're more into the 30k aspect. So we thought, well, look, everyone's moving that way. There's these new models coming out. There's Primaris, this and that. Why don't we go back to basics and look at what actually got us into this hobby and what we love about it? And for us, Book 1, Betrayal, Isstvan 3 campaign was the epitome of that kind of theme. And who knows, we're thinking about looking at other projects down the line. Maybe Isstvan 5 next, maybe Prospero at some point. But these armies aren't cheap, so let's stick to Isstvan 3 first and see where we go.
Yeah, and I actually, you're talking about 40k and this being a showing off of what not even a showing off, but a getting back to what you love about the game you play. I think in a time where like 40k is going to be getting all the attention going forwards, and quite rightly to a point. They got a new edition. GW are going to push it. Lots of people are going to be trying new things. There's some awesome new models coming out. That's fantastic. At these times, having something like this really does help people, remind people that this game's here. It's supported. It looks fantastic, and it's a cool game. And it's one of those things so we're not the big game on the block as Heresy. We're not even in the top few or whatever. That's the way we sit at the moment. So as a community, we have to be active because we have to, and whether you agree with that or not, whether you think GW should be doing more or not, the reality of it is it falls a little bit on us, particularly if you want to play games in your local area or wherever, then you have to be prepared to put in a little bit of work to make sure that people want to come play.
Yeah,
and something like this reaches out and it crosses barriers of gaming. So, what helps is something like Aaron Dembski-Bowden seeing Miles's tweet, thinking it's really cool, retweeting it. All of a sudden, the reach of the Heresy, not just your guys in Cardiff or the guys in Manchester or whatever, but the Heresy itself gets more acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, we've been lucky. I mean, having Aaron on board as well, being interested in the project, having Miles, obviously the platform he's got, David, the 30k channels kind of got involved now as well. So having these kind of big names in the community, like you said, really puts the word out there. They've got a lot of followers, they've got a lot of reach, and hopefully people will see this and get on board. Yeah,
and I'm absolutely right. That does help. I think you were getting a little bit of interest anyway without that. And I think having, as you say, having a unified vision of a project, and as I say, having a hashtag, everyone doing it on that, having a limited scope of what you're doing, I think helps as well. Helps portray an easy to follow narrative in terms of the narrative of what you guys are building.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, that's kind of why we put the hashtag together. I mean, it's something that can hopefully we can focus our energies and everyone can pay attention to and stay on track with it.
And it's something then that Miles I was talking to Miles about this, and he's like, get an army, and I'm like, dude, I have thousands of points of Space Wolves that are unpainted. Like, I can't just go and buy more toys. Like, I don't need an excuse not to paint the models I have. So, I'm not going to do it. But I can follow along.
Yeah. And in the future, return to Prospero. Who knows? Maybe
absolutely. There's plenty of opportunities down the line in whatever, and even though I'm starting on potentially a sickness force as well. So we could do that.
Some money, isn't there?
Yeah. It's too easy, far too easy. But so people like me who aren't going to get involved can follow along and feel part of, much like listening to a podcast, you feel part of a community doing that as well. But then actually one of the beauties is seeing the amount of people ask, what's this all about? What's going on? Oh, it's this. You can do it at home. You can do it in your groups. You can I might do that. And then all of a sudden you've got your two groups that are doing it, conjoined, but also then you've got other people doing it in their own areas that are semi-attached to your groups.
Yeah, exactly. It's extending the community and making those connections, isn't it? But also, if people want to get involved and they don't want to paint models, they can't, for whatever reason, get involved that way. If they want to write some fluff, if they want to draw some pictures and cool art, or just generally shout about the project, that they can still get involved that way as well. Okay, cool. So that'd be great. Yeah. So you guys are playing your campaign at your club. You're talking about a meetup, a Warhammer World. Yeah.
Would that be something that you would then expand out and say, look, we're doing this. It's happening. I mean, other people. I mean, looking at it, if you were in Essex, say you've got the gaming centre in Essex, Wayland Games, that whatever it's called. I think if I was there and I was taking part, I'd be organising my own game day for the end of it as well. If you're in Australia listening to this, you've got a group, or American, you can get a group of few people together, then I'd be thinking, okay, when the guys finish theirs and are doing their campaign, we'll try and do something similar, or a meet-up. That would be awesome. I mean, if the end of this, it spawns into people meeting up across the country, across the world, doing their own little events with, the Return to Isstvan hashtag or whichever, that would be amazing, because that would be exactly what we're trying to do. Is just to promote this game, as you say, and just enjoy the game that we all love. And if everyone wants to meet us up in Warhammer World, I'm sure we'll be shouting about it if that happens. So yeah, we'll definitely be up for meeting people there and coming and joining in. So how easy was it to get your group to, like, going back and doing a campaign? Notoriously difficult in certain groups to follow that through. I mean, I suppose the beauty of having a real narrative kind of group is you can let things slide and do, but you do need a certain level of commitment, don't you? How easy is that with your group? Our group's put on and done a couple of campaigns over the last couple of years for various game systems, mostly skirmish level, so Necromunda and Inquisitor, INQ28, that kind of thing. So putting together a squad or a warband is one thing, and generally people are okay, but putting together a 1,500-point army, it can be quite expensive. It can be difficult. So when we started talking about it, honestly, I didn't think it would get anywhere, because I thought it would be one of those things that, it sounds cool, but never actually happens. But everyone seemed really keen on it, and then before we knew it, people were signing up for Legions, and somebody said, I bought my first box of plastic models, and someone else had bought this, and someone's got this paints ready for that, and actually, this is actually kicking off. So, it's actually happening. Awesome. So, okay, that's really cool. Are you and at the moment you're just looking at playing that campaign, and you're not looking at too much beyond following that hashtag, putting up work in progress, showing what you're doing, showing off the campaign. Have you got any? Are there grander plans beyond this, or have you not thought that far, or is it seeing how things go? We'll see what happens with lockdown and everything, and how we go. But my idea for this, if we can get it off the ground, will be to build up our armies, show off the whip, show off the models getting produced and built,
and then maybe talk about the campaign, how we're going to structure it. But to be honest, it probably will be following the campaign from the book, because it's got Zone Mortalis rules in there. It's got some really cool scenarios to play. Like, I've been looking forward to playing that Angron special mission where he descends and kills all the world eaters since I got the model. So I'm probably going to switch sides for that one and be world eater for that one game. But yeah, I think just following the campaign as it's written. What I'm also going to do, I've ran a small campaign last year for my group based on the Necromunda rules, but using 30k Space Marines, like a 30k sort of skirmish type game. And that was really fun. So I'm probably going to put something like that together. So for the very early opening stages of the campaign, people can play sort of small. If they've only got like a squad painted or a couple of models painted, they can still have a couple of games while they're building their armies up. I was thinking of making some scenarios to reflect around when the army actually arrived at Isstvan, and they had to sort of pacify it for a second time before the betrayal happened, to take over the moons and take over the space stations and then land in the Coral City. So I thought that would make quite a cool little intro phase that I might write up, but I've not got down to writing that yet. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you guys are all doing this in your spare time as a hobby. So don't feel that there's pressure on you to do any more than that. But if people have got other ideas of how to expand it, then and using that hashtag, showing off what you're doing, again, other people might then see that, take that on board and adapt it for what they're doing as well. It's a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see that. If someone else creates anything that will work for this campaign, please let me know. Use the hashtag and send it to us.
So the hashtag works for Instagram and Twitter. Is there a Facebook?
I'm not on Twitter very much, but Instagram and Facebook definitely it's working on. So those two are the main ones that I use.
Whereabouts on Facebook would people...
So you can find our Cardiff group. We're called the Cambrian Synod. So if you search that as Cambrian and the Synod, SYNOD, search that on Facebook, we're on there. Or just stick in the Return to Isstvan hashtag. And that's Isstvan with 2 S's. This is something that Miles has been quite keen
the correct way.
Upon us.
It's the correct way.
Yeah.
It's the way GW license it to other people.
So, exactly. So that's why we're using it.
If people are paying for that name, then it's got to be the best one or the correct one. So yeah. Plenty of things get lost in the folds of time.
Well, apparently both spellings are correct in Imperial records, apparently. But exactly. The Isstvan double S apparently has come from the Forge World Style Guide, so we have to use that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as I say, those names and things like that are usually 10,000 years difference, so it's,
exactly.
It's easy for someone to have misplaced some letters in a tome somewhere. And people, I mean, they don't even know what date they're on in M41. Bless them, they got about 7 different working dates, which is crazy. Which is cool. Which is why we love this universe.
Absolutely,
because it's that big that can happen, and it's accepted. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to be certainly keeping an eye on what's going on there, and maybe, as I say, if you can get a meet up to head up and look at, because again, it's just a great excuse to meet mates as much as anything else.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's also really good. Yes, the armies are limited, but if you were thinking about one of those forces, then it's a good way of starting off one of those forces, or even if you're curious to go and look at what other people are doing with those forces as well.
Yeah, and starting a Centurion army is a brilliant way of developing that into a full-fledged force later on if you wanted to as well.
Yeah, it's a dangerous way of doing that, I think. I think is the terminology on that one. I think it's fantastic. I really do. I think we need... and there's people out there doing lots of great things. I think it's just another example of a community stepping up. And I think as a community, we sometimes get a little bit caught up in our space in Games Workshop's pantheon and on all those kind of things. And none of that really does the community any good. Sometimes it's fun to vent and what have you. I completely understand that. But what you do by having, the stuff you mentioned, the Mournival guys putting out rules and stuff like that. You've got the Battlefleet Heresy rules that people are putting out. And you know what, for me, I could take them or leave them. I'm not going to play Battlefleet Heresy. If Games Workshop release a game, I will play that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have a lot of value for a lot of other people. And all you're doing then is creating a community that looks to help each other and make an environment in which people want to be in, and that's key. That really
well,
is
exactly.
cool.
I mean, we're in no way unique in that. As you mentioned, Battlefield Heresy has done a great job in promoting that game. There's a really strong Epic 30k scene. There's INQ28. There's loads of other things going on Instagram and on social media. So yeah, we're not unique in any way, but we kind of want to do our bit and get involved with that kind of project.
Yeah, it all adds to the mix. You're all unique in your own special way.
We're all special snowflakes.
Absolutely, I will say that. No, that's really cool. So this all started, we're a week or so into it all?
We're probably, into it sort of, I say launching, into it being a presence on social media about a week or so. Yeah, we've been talking about it for, a couple of weeks now, probably, because I can't remember when that preview was now with Soul Targets, but it was a good month at least ago, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, so we've been talking about it for a while, but yeah, we've kind of decided to actually make a move and actually get something done. Cool. We're obviously waiting for Forge World to open. That's going to be that's a major blockage at the moment in our plan.
Isn't it just? I think we're a little way off that. And I was thinking they were going to just launch out the Black Book immediately, but then I'm thinking they're going to be rammed. Forge World's going to be. I mean, if you look at the trading sites at the moment, you can basically
it's crazy.
You can get more than you pay for stuff for unbuilt.
I put a post up the other day and I got my hand snapped off. Basically, it was crazy.
It's madness. So I think when Forge World come out, they're just going to be catching up, trying to keep up with orders for a little while.
Yeah, definitely.
But we'll get there. Everything will be cool. There's still plastics available as well, particularly when you're talking about doing Centurion. People can go and get plastics. You still see the sprues from Betrayal at Calth every now and then appearing on those trading groups and stuff that. There's a lot of stuff out there you can do still, but once Forge World catches up, we'll be hitting it right out the park then.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're all pretty much revving to go.
Awesome. I just thought it was a really novel idea to kind of reach out in terms of what you guys are doing. So I thought I want to grab one of you and get you on. And we've had Lex and Pete and Miles enough, so so thank you for coming on for that. And maybe we'll start to see some of these armies down the line when we start getting events going again. People's return to Isstvan armies are suddenly the armies they're taking to events and stuff like that, which is part of the goal, isn't it? That people are creating forces and moving forwards.
Yep.
I think it's really cool. Anything else that you think you can add to it, or we kind of covered most things?
I think that's everything. I mean, if this goes well, if we all enjoy this project and it goes really well, we are thinking of doing maybe Isstvan 5 next. That's a very different beast with much bigger armies, Primarchs involved, or even Prospero, which has. I originally thought quite a tight list of armies, but actually after having read in book 7, there's actually loads of different armies that were there.
There's a lot going on at Prospero, isn't there?
A lot of scope for different weird things, yeah.
Yeah, you forget that. Was it Maccabeus? House Maccabeus were quite active there as well, and
there was a couple of knights, a couple of Titan legions there as well. Loads of Imperial Army, Solar Auxilia,
the Talons of the Emperor. Yeah, it's more than you think.
Even Sons of Horus were there. To a small number,
of course they were. Little sods, but but there is that scope, and I do think it also reminds people of the value of what the Black Books can offer outside of the rules. Because at the end of the day, you can't use many of the rules from that book for your armies, can you?
Well, the army list has come from there, but I thought that's been updated now, hasn't it? But it's a great book. I mean, think about when it was first released. It was so. Unique in that it's got loads of fluff in it. It's got Zone Mortalis rules. It's got a massive army list. It's got Primarchs in it. Actual Primarch stats. Amazing missions, great art, and it just looked gorgeous. It's all those tomes just massive.
Yeah, it's easy to move on, to always look at the next thing. But we're sitting, I'm sitting on the shelf, and pretty soon I'm going to have 9 Black Books on that shelf, and it's easy. It's even easier to go, well, those first 3 books are pretty much not relevant anymore. And then you were like, actually, well, it's only the army lists that have been updated. And actually, the army lists are only, a third of the book?
Yeah, and you could even, just limit yourself to that army list and not play the updates, really. And just play
absolutely.
That list. That would be fine.
Crusade. Yeah, Crusade lists and all that. So there's a lot of scope, and when you look, particularly if you own every book, that's a lot of info. That's a lot of different gaming environments, types, a lot of extra rules, campaign rules, different ways of playing. There's a huge amount of scope in those books. So, and if you, particularly if you own them, then you're not paying anything to go back and look at this stuff. So, I think one of the things that I was looking at, a lot of people were looking at, was 2020 would be the year of getting the stuff they own painted. I think we could add on to that. Why not make it the year of making use of all the stuff you have in your house already?
That's a great idea. I mean, you're never going to finish painting your stuff anyway, so you might as well look at the next project. It might as well be Isstvan.
It might as well be. Once we get to the better legions, yeah, maybe.
Maybe we should have changed the hashtag to it might as well be Isstvan.
I'd be so tempted to join in, but there's no way I'm painting white and blue. I just no.
Well, in our group, Greg, the only person we haven't got a team for is Traitor World Eaters.
Is it? Yeah. Well, that's I wouldn't be traitors for a start. Wouldn't be traitors. I'd be facing down Angron. No worries about that. They're the coolest colour scheme in the whole heresy, but I couldn't do it myself. But yeah, there's so much cool stuff, as you say. I mean, it's easy to forget as well. You mentioned it there, and it's easy to fall into saying, I couldn't do traitors. Okay, cool, but you can still do 18 legions then, because there are elements of every single legion. I think it's sometimes it's easy to forget that. Sometimes something like going back to Isstvan 3 reminds you that actually there's some really awesome like loyalist traitor forces or traitor loyalist forces or those kind of things as well. There is a huge scope in what we do. We hear people say, "Oh yeah, I couldn't play 30k, it's just Marine on Marine," and that sounds dull. And that's spoken out of a little bit of ignorance, to be fair. And fair play, they haven't read the stuff, so they can't know any better. But sometimes it's just good to remind yourself how much cool stuff there is and how much of a scope you can have, even with 18 varieties of Space Marine.
There's so much, isn't it? I mean, part of the joy of this project actually was developing a new legion. Was reading the fluff of a brand new. I mean, I've read World Eater stuff all the time because they're my favourite legion. But reading the Emperor's Children, I'm thinking, actually, there's some really cool little bits in here. Some really cool little sort of points they put in the fluff of the first book about how why they're purple and why they've got the Paladin Aquila and why there wasn't that many of them to start with. So there's some really cool fluff, and it really gets you interested in this new legion, and you develop a new understanding and a new respect for a whole new section of the lore then.
Wonderful stuff. Well, maybe we'll get you back on later on in the project and see how it's going and everything.
Yeah, great.
But we'll call that one there, and I'll go and check what my wife's just broken on the floor. If everyone heard that, no. There we go. Her first appearance on the show, vocally. But we'll go and check she's all right. Thank you for coming on, Dan. And as I say, hopefully we'll get you on soon. If not, I will see you over a gaming table at some point.
I hope so. Thanks,
cheers.
mate.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to another episode of The Imperial Truth. As usual, you can contact the show, Greg at theimperialtruth.com. Come find our Facebook page. Come find our Twitter, Imperial_Truth, at Child of Fang for me on Twitter and on Instagram. If you've got any feedback, throw it at us. Got any ideas, throw it at us. Everything's still super kind of up in the air at the moment, making things awkward. I know it certainly is. This side of things, there's a strange time in that people who aren't working and don't have kids maybe have too much time on their hands, but people who do have kids or are working or are both seem to have no time at all. So there are a couple of things that are in the pipeline that are just being held up on basis of people having to work too hard, things like that. So fingers crossed we can get that all sorted for you, and we've got some cool stuff lined up for the show. Just say that if you want to support the show, we do have the Patreon, or the links in the show notes for that. But I don't really want to say too much more, except everyone, please be safe, keep well as much as you can, and look after each other. And until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.